All right. So basically, this is the first of the Shadowcrat meetings that I wanted to do, and I wanted to start with something very simple, and that is basically taking a look at what it takes to get your bid ready. Now, one of the biggest things that people want to do is they want to start with a bid, and they say, "I'm just going to get the bid sheet and fill it out." Well, that's great, except for two small problems. One, you don't have a theme, and two, you don't have a crew. So it makes it very hard to fill out this sheet. Let me drag the sheet over so people can see it really quick. So give me 1 second. I'll put this into the Zoom and I'll share the screen. So let me do that really quick. Zoom, share screen, screen 2. All right, so this is the bid sheet. And when we work with the bid sheet, the biggest thing you've got is you have your event name, your site, your date. So what we've been asked to do is reach out to the Kingdom Seneschal, and when we want to get an event site for a Kingdom level event and get it approved. They tend to want to talk, if we're using Camp Challenge, they tend to want to talk to Maggie before we do, just because they want to confirm that the date's okay with the Kingdom calendar. So I tentatively put a date in and wait to see if that's a good one, and then they'll set up the conversation with Maggie. If we're using a different site like say Kiwanis or I'm trying to think another site that we use quite a bit. Those are the two Darkwater sites that we use quite a bit. If we're doing something other than Challenge, again, it's probably a good idea to reach out to the site and see if they have those days open, and then get with the Seneschal and say, hey, I talked to them. These are open. Which of these can we use? The next thing you've got is hosting branch name or individual bid. All right. Hosting branch is a requirement. We found this out the hard way. You have to have, it has to be a sponsoring group. Cannot be a household, cannot be a, like in our surprise, the Pelicans or Laurels or any of that. It has to be sponsored by an actual group. That can be a canton, that can be a shire, that can be a barony. Barring that, it becomes a kingdom bid. And then the date that you're going to submit this to the Seneschal also needs to be filled out. So we have the top section. That's great. But if you look just below that, now you start seeing event staff. And when you get ready to put an event together, the first thing you need to know is, what do you want to do? And the second thing is, who can you con into working with you? Because when you start doing an event, you're asking people to commit a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lack of sleep, and more often than not, a lack of food. It sort of works out that way. I don't know. I always lose a little weight when I go to when I autocrat an event. So that's why I do it so often. I try to get a little less fluffy. So, So what I did is I created a document in 2020, and it needs a little bit of updating, but I'll move it over so we can take a look at it. So let me put this on here. So we got that. And this is the Autocrat's handbook, or Event Steward's handbook, that's currently on the Trimarian website. It's under Seneschal, and it's also the same place where you'll find the link for the event bid. Funny how that works out. So the biggest thing is when we start talking about creating a bid is I really want to think about, what's my theme? What do I want to do? Now, if it's a coronation event or a crown list event, you do have to get it approved by the royals. Most of the time, they're pretty good about it, but if you go off on a weird tangent, sometimes they tend to say no, and so you have to start over. This last one, I had a great idea about using a movie reference, and the crown felt that was probably not appropriate enough for what we wanted to do. And I said, okay. So we talked to the crown, we got their ideas, we found out what they were thinking, and we were able to adapt the theme to meet their needs and to still make it fun for people who want to attend. So for the theme for Spring Coronation is King for a Day, Fool for Life. And the idea behind it is it happens over April Fool's weekend. So that's a good fitting theme. It has a tie-in. We have something we can work with. We're all coming back from Gulf Wars. It will be a coronation. So again, the idea of king crowning somebody. And while we're all at Gulf Wars, of course, we're just post Mardi Gras and there's king cake and things like that. So there's a lot of things we can do with that. And when we start looking at historical ideas to kind of help pull in together, one of the ideas that Shannon and I thought about were harlequins and jesters. And so we're going to try to use some of that in our environment. And I've got doubloons already. They actually say I was caught doing a good deed. And there's about 5 different colors of them. Cost me about $8 on Amazon. They're plastic, no big deal. And what we're going to do is we're going to encourage people to participate through service. And for every 30 minutes of service that they do, we're going to give them a colored coin for the piece of service that they're doing. So if they're doing, say, gate, they get a green one. If they're doing reservations, they get a blue one. So on and so forth. They're going to autocrat, shadow autocrat, they get a different color, So if they're feast-cratting, they're going to get a different one. And what we're going to do then is we're going to have people take a Sharpie, put their initials on it or put their name on it. And then we'll put them into baskets. We will have random drawings, and each of those drawings will, whoever wins will receive a prize. So we've incentivized people to help at the event, and at the same time, learn new things about being an event steward or being a res steward or a gate staff or whatever. So you want to find ways to try to do things where not only are we running the event, but we're helping teach other people how to run the event, how to do different pieces. Because let's face it, it's a lot of times, and Trimarian has been kind of bad at this of late, it's the same groups of people who've been running the Kingdom events. And we see this at the baronial level too. It usually ends up being the same group of people who end up running baronial events, and they just change places in which particular station at the event they want to run. So we want to prevent burnout, and we also want to include new people and get them excited about doing events because it's really a lot of fun. There's a lot of opportunity to do things, be creative. You do a lot of problem solving. You do a lot of planning. And at the same time, you build people skills. For those that are not peers, it's a great chance for them to show that they're doing leadership roles or that they're doing service, that sort of thing. So it makes it nice to be able to bring both of all that together in a group and make a event. So like I said, we kind of played with the theme, and my biggest thing with a theme is I want to make sure that it's fun. We can't just do it's crown list. We're gonna go fight and then we're gonna have feast and go home. Boring event. Instead, we want to find something that's going to motivate people to come to the event. Because if you think about it, one of the biggest things we have going on is we have no, it doesn't. I just got an email from Tom McCorn. So telling me that I had to put about 4 paragraphs worth of stuff on a flyer. It's not going to happen. So he needs to go back and recheck flyers. So that's another issue that you will encounter is that we have people who have differing expectations of what needs to be on the event flyer, what needs to not be on the event flyer. As of right now, when we create the event flyer, it has to be in tailwinds 2 months prior to your event. So you want to do that. And at that point, when we do the event flyer, There is a bullying policy. There's an anti-COVID or anti-bullying policy and a COVID policy. They're both about a paragraph long. So prepare for at least a small corner of your event flyer to be eaten up by that. You need to have your Autocrat and needs to have at least a contact email and a contact phone number. Your Rescrat needs at least an email and a contact phone number. I'm having a debate with the Kingdom Seneschal right now over the fact that I'm not putting people's home addresses on this. I don't think that's necessary. It hasn't been before. We need the Feastcrat needs a phone number and an email at the very minimum level. Again, because we need to be able to call for reservation questions. We need to call for feast allergies, things of that nature. But I always make a point to put on there no calls after a certain time. And that prevents your staff from getting calls at 11, 12 o'clock at night from somebody who's suddenly decided that they need to have this conversation. And no offense, if you call me after 9, I'm probably asleep. So at least I'm honest. So again, when you're doing your flyer, it needs to also have the date and times of the event, when does site open, when does site close. It needs to list if there's a fundraiser lunch or not. It does help to, if you're doing at least a coronation, to say who's getting coronated. That does help a little bit. So that's kind of it. I can tell you right now, give me 1 second and I can kind of give you an idea. Let me find the actual email because I can bring it up here real quick. Give me just 1 second. Wrong one. Bid form, spring coordination flyer. Here we go. Okay. Currently, he's expressing that we need to have both the hosting group on there, and he wants to add the Pelicans on there. He wants to put in this a fundraiser for Kingdom Scribal and Regalia committees. He also wants to put on there the coronation of Princess Catherine Fernier and Prince Sir Vincent Fernier. He wants the dates, the time it opens, time it closes, when ePay registration opens. He wants email addresses, and he says we're supposed to put a US mail address and phone number there too. Again, that's never been on a flyer, just the email and phone. Once the mundane names for the reservations staff and their SCA names, 1 email address and 1 phone number. The fees do have to be on there. And then he would like to know presented by whoever the Feastcrat is with their real name, SCA name, and email address. Fundraiser lunch, again, who's doing the fundraiser lunch. That's in addition to the flyer that currently has the location of the camp, its physical address, who your autocrats are, who your reservations people are, who your feast stewards are, and all of that information has to be kind of crammed onto the flyer. So just something to kind of keep in mind when you're trying to plan out what you want your flyer to look like. And you're really having to play with space, but it's also got to be readable. Yes, I could make my font 6-point or 8-point font and probably squeeze it all in there. Can you read it in Tailwinds? No. So that's something to keep in mind. Another thing we want to think about when you're doing an event is, again, we're going to talk about theme, is how much pre-planning do you need to do to make your theme work? If you're doing a very elaborate theme, maybe you're doing one, I've seen one recently where they did a Back to the Future type theme. And what they did with that one, there was a lot of pre-planning because they would have an award or two come up, and they would have somebody come in and, do the, Marty, your kids, they're doing horrible things. You're going to have to come with us, and it kind of went back and forth, and they played with this for the entire court, They did their tokens were ticket stubs. So they did like movie ticket stubs, which was really cool. Um, let's see what else. They themed their feast was themed welcome to the movies. So they had popcorn and hot dogs and soda. So that was kind of a thing. Another part that they did was at reservations. It was they did that in the two people doing res were dressed up in costumes. It looked like the Matrix, so that was kind of fun. But again, it just depends on what you're trying to do with the theme. You know, how serious do you want to be? How comfortable are your royals with doing particular types of themes? Some people like to keep it very medieval. Some people like to make it very, slapstick. Just depends. So again, you kind of want to have an idea of the theme in mind before you put in your bid. It also helps that when you submit your bid and you submit it to the crown, you've already explained what your bid is. So they can know whether or not that's something they want to be a part of. And if they're not, then they can always reject your bid and you can do it at another time. Typically, I will tell people that you should start planning your bid 6 months in advance. Now, I will also say that you can pull off a kingdom event in 60 days. You can actually do it in even less than that if you have to. I can legitimately say that we did a coronation event from start to finish in 30 days. We got a special exemption from the Society Seneschal to do it because of the length of time it took to get the bid approved. It does take some time to get the bid approved. That's why you want to have your bid in for, at least 90 days, if not more. Yeah, Oldenville pulled off an event in 3 weeks. So yes, you can do it. It's just that they when you do those kind of quick bids, you really want to already have your event staff together in your mind. And it helps if you talk to your friends before you volunteer them. I didn't do that with Shannon. She just got volunteered. It was pretty good. We were sitting next to each other and I looked at her and she's like, "Oh no." And I held up my hand and up hers went. So, works out pretty good that way. But we're lucky in the fact that we have a good crew to work with. You don't want to. That is very true. You don't want to. When we play with events, you really want to have as much time as you can to prepare. Because again, you're going to want to get things to decorate. You're going to want to do things like get information out, create websites, things of that, and it becomes very time consuming if you have a full-time job to also do all the things that need to happen for your event. I think what else with themes. I think the other biggest thing with themes is you want to make sure that it is doable. I've seen some people try to do some very elaborate themes. One did a Midsummer's Night's Dream, and they wanted to put everybody in Tudor costumes, and they were doing the whole feast was going to be with a play during the feast, and it was very elaborate and it was very expensive, and it didn't work. It absolutely did not work. It was probably one of the worst events that I had seen in a long time. And when we talked about it afterwards, because it was a friend of mine from the East Kingdom, they told me, they said they didn't understand why it went so badly. And I said, you blew your entire budget plus a lot of personal money on garbing up people in costumes they don't normally wear. You had people who weren't really your bards performing a play, and it didn't. And the crown, I think at the time, was doing it was like 14th century French or something, so it really didn't work at all. And so again, that's one of those things where you kind of need to have some ideas, and it never hurts to have a backup plan. Again, when we talk about trying to get ready to be an autocrat, for, or an event steward, because there are some people who prefer to be called event stewards, you really have to be thinking to yourself, how can I pre-plan as much as I can? Like I said, this is before you even start talking to people about your event. You want to have some ideas about how you want it to go, what you want to do, how you want to decorate things, that sort of thing. So that when you start talking to your team, you can give them an idea of what to expect. It's very frustrating for some team members to suddenly be told, oh, by the way, we're going to do a theme about masquerade, and you're going to have to wear, a mask all day. And there are some people who just aren't comfortable with that. We've had people who didn't want to do gate. They just get really anxious, so you don't want to put them at a high event where there's going to be a lot of people coming through gate. It's one thing if you're doing a small baronial event and you're expecting 100 people. For kingdom events, we've been averaging about 300 plus. So something to keep in mind. Another thing is like ArtSci. When you do ArtSci, there's a very big difference between the Autocrat's role at ArtSci and the Autocrat's role at say Coronation or Crown List. ArtSci is run primarily by the KMOS and the Chancellor of the Laureate, or the not Laureate, the head of ArtSci. I forget what their title is now all of a sudden. But basically, they're in charge of the event. Our job as Autocrats for that event is to provide manpower so that they can do whatever they want to do. And that can be frustrating for Autocrats. I've seen some people get really irritated, especially if it's not well communicated to the Autocrat who agrees to do it, that is the conditions under which they'll be working. So it's a lot of moving parts as the Autocrat to try to get your ideas and your dreams and your ambitions all in one coherent place. So you have an event idea, you've started to fill out your bid sheet, and the next thing you've got to do is you've got to figure out basically what you're going to do for a staff. And I always tell people, remember that anybody you put on your staff may no longer be your best friend when you're done with it, because you're asking for quite a bit for them to do. Let's see. For a kingdom event, first kingdom event, for someone wanting to take on an event, stewarding ArtSci is a good event to start with, since you have several other coordinators by default. That's a very good point, Mark, and that's actually one of the pluses towards it. You just did one, so you want to give us a little bit about your experiences with ArtSci? As soon as he unmutes himself.
Yeah, as soon as I find where the mute button moved to. Yeah, having autocratted and event stewarded a kingdom event before, I didn't have to work nearly as hard as I did before, because you're working in coordination with the ArtSci minister. So you're the coordinating of classes and coordinating of teachers has been taken out of your hands. The ArtSci competition is run by them, so you don't need to worry about that. And typically you're not going to have as many martial activities, so you don't even need to worry about coordinating with a marshal for the event. So it's definitely I could say that ArtSci last weekend was the easiest event that I've run out of all the runs one I've done. I've had, it was probably easier than most of the local events I've run. But that's partially because I had a very experienced, cracked, knowledgeable staff, lots of backup, as well as coordinating with the ArtSci minister and her team. The people who cooked for the breakfast, the luncheon, and the populace lunch are all experienced, and I didn't have any first-time staff, so that was just a benefit to me. Of course, if you ever do have first-time staff, having them shadow someone for their first time around is always beneficial.
Yeah, I think for us, when we did art sci earlier last year, um, there was a lot of confusion over who was doing what. And my autocrat got very frustrated. And it was her, I believe it was her first Kingdom event that she had done. So it was very difficult for her to handle. But like you said, if you have first time event staff, it doesn't hurt to have somebody there as a backup just in case. I tend to let my first time event staff lead with an experienced person kind of in the wings if they get in trouble.
It is critical to have very clear tasks defined for each staff.
Yes.
The staff positions are clearly defined. And if any overlap, then you must delineate very clearly what those differences are and who's doing what. That way, you're not going to accidentally duplicate work, as well as having any gaps. You may have a situation where two people might assume they're supposed to do something, and now you've got two people doing the same task. And having it overlap isn't bad in itself, but now you're having to deal with toes possibly getting stepped on because so-and-so always does this task as opposed to someone who thought they were supposed to do it. So
Right.
now you're dealing with interpersonal issues with your staff and having to make sure everybody comes away from that particular conflict happy or working as a team to fix it.
Right. And the other part too, I've discovered, and this is true with regular Kingdom events especially, you need to have people who understand that when the event is going to go off on Friday, they pretty much have to take Friday off, because you're looking at, having somebody's got to go to the Kingdom storeroom. They're going to have to get all the stuff from the storeroom. Then you've got to bring it to site, which is, if you're going from the Kingdom storeroom, is an hour and a half drive through Orlando traffic with a trailer or a U-Haul. So you got to budget in that in your budget. Then once it gets to site, you've got to get it all set up. And normally site opens to the populace around 4 o'clock. If you're doing an elevation, you have to make special arrangements for that crew to get on, especially if they're doing a Friday night elevation. They want to get their tent set up. They want to get their stuff put out. They need to have room in the kitchen to do whatever feast crowding they need to do for their event. So they have quite a bit going on, and you can't count on them to be able to give you an extra hand. If anything, they're oftentimes asking, can you have anybody spare to give me a hand? So that's something else that you want to kind of keep in mind. I mean, I've done one event with 2 elevations at the same time, and it was challenging because we ran into a lot of, well, who wants to do this over here? Who wants to be over here? How do we get people from point A to point B? We're sending them both out at the same time at court. So, do I need to make sure I have things like off and lighting in that area? Again, I'm thinking ADA. So again, I want to make sure that if Mistress Finwalla wants to attend both of them, I've got to make sure she can get there safely. We have people in the kingdom with low light vision issues. We have people who have mobility issues. So that's another thing that you kind of want to think about. And you want to think about that when you're thinking about your site too. How hard is it for people to get around? Lalanda was kind of a mixed blessing at times because you had a high curb, you had some sidewalks, but it also flooded. So that was a problem. You have people who want to tent, you're trying to find places where they can tent safely and not be flooded out. We have an area in the case of Lalanda where we had trailer parking, but it was very limited. So then you had to limit who could bring trailers in. And they don't always play nice about that. People will tend to show up with a trailer, and I've had to tell people, I'm sorry, there's no hookups. You're going to have to go park out in the field. And, as an autocrat, you try to be understanding as you can, but again, there's just sometimes when you have to say no. So again, and you have to remember to be polite. Um, we're all friends, we're all in the society together. It does nobody any good to start an argument. If things start to get out of hand, it's better to go ahead and call for the seneschal and let the seneschal start handling it. I tend to have a very easy relationship with the constables. They have a lot of things they have to do for security purposes. So I want to make sure that I make their life easy. They have to deal with parking issues and things like that. You know, so I want my gate staff to be able to, work with the constables. Radios are optional. I believe in the staff having radios. Other autocrats don't think they need radios. It depends on your staff and the type of event you're running. Um, you know, so that's another thing you need to consider. Do I need radios? If so, does the local group who's running the event, do they have radios? Do we need to, work out something with the kingdom to get a set of radios? Things like that. So it's another element you have to consider. So with all that in mind, we're kind of at a point where we have a theme. We've started to look at our crew. And again, we've talked about, we want new crew and old crew together. We want to try to have that balance. Again, the other thing I make a point of is checking in with my crew. Every week to 2 weeks, I check in with my crew. When we get a month out, I'm checking in with them at least once a week, probably at least twice a week when we get within 3 weeks of the event. I've got a web person who I'm constantly having update, put stuff on the websites, not only the event website, but Facebook, on the Bronial site or the, Canton site or whatever, so that people know what's going on. The less people understand about your event or what's going on, the lower your attendance will be. You cannot count on people just going to an event because it's a kingdom event. Because that's usually when things don't go well. Especially at Bronial events, I've seen some where there was a lot of confusion over camping, e-pay, over cost. And unfortunately, the websites weren't updated. They weren't even put out in time. Everything got really messed up. So they've struggled with events, and there's been a couple that have had to been canceled because they just couldn't get it together in time. And that's something we want to prevent. Give me 1 second. There's a chat message. One advantage with this one is most of the main jobs being handled by Pelicans. That's true. And actually, the only one I currently don't have filled is sanitation. So I'm trying to work on that one to see who we can get to do sanitation. So I'm going to put a post up actually tomorrow, seeing if anybody is available that wants to help with sanitation or that can, before I start trying to con friends and family into being willing to help with sanitation. So, but again, that's one of those things where having an experienced group of people or people who do a lot of service is going to make your event easier. I'm looking forward to the spring coronation. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think that, we have an interesting group of people who want to do it. And I think having the Pelicans being, involved and being excited to help out, and also the Canton being willing to help out, it gives you a whole lot of people that don't normally do a lot of events, because a lot of our Pelicans are teaching people how to do events. And you have the Cantons who, for lack of a better term, can sometimes be considered too small to do events, or at least a kingdom event, or they feel that way. There's really not. As long as you can fill the main positions, everything else is pretty much doable. I mean, I've seen investitures done with a skeleton crew. I've seen, a kingdom event got ran right after COVID with a very skeleton crew, but they pulled it off. So again, it's all about who wants to do what and who wants to try that. I got another chat. Hold on one second. That's what proteges are for. You said it, sir, not me. But with all that said, I want to open it up the last 15 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes for questions or ideas or things that you've done from your experiences and that you'd like to share for the recording, so that people who watch this will have a kind of a reference point to start working from. And again, I have another text, and it's a smiley face. Nice. All right. Like I said, Mark, I'll go back to you since you were the last autocrat to run in the group. Just some thoughts you might have on themes and on getting your crew together.
I actually was saved from a lot of the stress of coming up with a theme, since the Art Sci Fair had a lot of the activity was already clearly defined. But since their majesties had been documenting their reign as a progress along the Silk Road, the theme was already halfway built. I just said, well, let me model the event as a stop on the Silk Road. So I messaged Her Majesty and saying, I would like to do this as, because it's art sci, as like an academic stop, a stop at a major education center along the Silk Road. And so she did a little bit of light research and said, well, by then we should be progressed to this particular point on the map. Why don't we go with, this Persian theme? And so I looked up, I did a little bit of light research on any Persian educational centers in that region, came up with one, and and that gave me graphics and things to use for the flyer. And I sent that to Her Majesty, and she was happy with it. And that was pretty much it. It was let me build off of Their Majesty's progress, and that was my theme. If I was going to build an event bid whole cloth for, say, a crown tournament, of course I would, it would be up to me to come up with a theme and then run it by Their Majesties for their approval, and that was it. If it's going to be a coronation, I would be speaking with the new inbound crown about what they would want for a theme, since it dovetails with the crown's progress and the crown's persona. Kingdom event themes for me are easier because the direction you're going to go in is already partially defined, and you just need to find that direction and fill it out. A local event's going to be way more wide open if you want to do something very specialized, sort of like when Mistress Marie and I wanted to save one of our local events from the chopping block back when we were newbies.
Yeah,
What was it, 2009?
about
We
that,
had been
yeah.
in about 5 years, and one of our events, Oldenfeld does 5 events a year.
Or used to.
At least. And one of them, the attendance the previous year was under 50 people. So there was discussion of whether we should continue the event or drop it from our scheduled year. And we had an idea, and we asked the Autocrat the next one to determine if it would be savable.
Now, part of this, it's seasonal. So this event was held at the end of February, beginning of March, more like the last weekend in February, which coincides happily with the Lunar New Year or Chinese New Year. So I did the theme of Chinese New Year for that event. Miklos was the feast crat.
She was event steward, I was cook.
And we went with that. We organized everything.
We invited anyone with an Asian persona to come on out.
And that was before Asian personas were really cool, very as welcomed as they are now.
You did Asian themed events before it was cool?
Well, no, there wasn't as many Asian themed personas, as well as the SCA didn't really look at the Asian environment as part of the SCA. So it was out of the boundaries at the time. I brought a lot of personal stuff on because we as a mundane family celebrate Chinese New Year. So we were able to incorporate some of our personal traditions into the event.
And it was successful.
It was successful. It was very an emotional one for me, only because that Wednesday the kids were working on a New Year's Eve play, and I went to go pick them up and I was in a car accident. And
That complicates an event.
that complicated event because Leslie was, our oldest daughter was put in ICU, and but then again, at the same time, the barony of Oldenfeld pulled together and helped us out. We still made it to the event. Leslie was released the Saturday of the event. I had somebody take me to, because since I couldn't drive at the time because I was still recovering myself, pick her up from the hospital, bring her straight to the event, because we knew more people would be able there to help us at the event than me
at
being
home.
home at home. But even so, the event was successful because of the people that showed up and participated in. We played Mahjong. I taught Mahjong. The feast was yummy. Even if we could have been there, our barony members would have jumped in because of our emergency at the time. And it saved Lion's Tourney for a couple of years until COVID. So,
and that's a great story on how real life events can throw an event into chaos, and you have to be ready for all contingencies. The event still went on with, as
Without
far as I
any
recall, no hitches, even though Denise was worrying about 2 of our 3 children in an ICU the Friday before that event. So yeah, so that's 2 stories on running an event.
I was going to say, it reminds me of Coronation 2.0 several years ago, where the Southern Shires were going to run the event, and the hurricane came
yep.
and canceled the event when it was supposed to happen. And then we had a last minute change, and so I picked up Autocrat for that with the help of Tom Conti, who was the Kingdom Seneschal at the time, who had never run an event. So, it was kind of fortuitous that I had some volunteers from all over the kingdom who were willing to kind of pitch in at the last minute to make this event happen. But again, it was one of those things where the Southern Shires had done most of the work for us. So it was mostly just a picking up where they had stopped and taking over the event from there and just trying to finish it up for them. So, you have to have some flexibility. You're going to have that case where we ran the Kingdom Arts side, Castlemere did, and Liz and I only have the one vehicle right now, and she got a severe migraine, and I had to leave site. So I had to leave it in the hands of my Autocrat and just hope for the best, because I couldn't stay on site. And I will tell you, I called her enough times that I thought she was going to just strangle me on general principle. So, there was that. But when you prepare for your event, that's something else you want to keep in mind. Is it so complex that if something really were to go out of line or happen out of sequence, can it still come off? Can it still happen, even if there is some glitches? And as Autocrat, there will be glitches. There will be. Your Feastcrat will tell you all of a sudden that they have one stove, it'll rain torrentially, just,
or the stove isn't working.
Oh,
right.
gosh,
Stove doesn't work at all.
Or
Or
the stove is out.
How do you
the
turn on
power-
a pilot light?
How do you light a pilot? Or the power in the kitchen is down, or the Hobart is broken.
oh
or
yeah.
a number of things.
Yeah, I think we had cows on site one time. That was interesting. We had cows running through the site, so that was cool.
And there was the bear sighting.
The bear sightings, yes, that was always fun. So yeah, I mean, as Autocrat, you kind of have to have a little bit of flexibility in what you're doing, because it is going to be, there will be things, and as long as the populace aren't really aware that things are going sideways and they're all having a good time and their crowns are happy, then the event's okay. You're going to be fine. You'll get through the event and it'll all work out.
Yep.
So with that, I'm going to end this one on that high note. And when we resume next week, I want to get into, we'll start talking about the things that have to be done, such as dealing with how much we're going to pay for a site, how much can we afford, membership charges, insurance, how do you start building the event with spreadsheets, things of that nature. And then so that's what we've got on tap for next week. So it will be next Monday at 7. We'll try to run till about 8 o'clock. or maybe a little less, depends on how many people we get to show up. And I want to thank everybody who showed up tonight. Give me 1 second. There's one more chat here, and I want to make sure we get that. Cantons can ask for help from their Barony. Very much so.
And I had a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
With local events, do they also need to be approved by the Kingdom Seneschal?
No, they do not. To my knowledge, if you do a local event, it is the seneschal of the local group that is in charge for doing the contracts and for putting on the event. So,
Thank
yeah, usually,
if it's-
at least in Castlemere, it goes to our financial committee. The seneschal, the autocrat for the event will present the bid to the group, and then the financial committee will vote. And then if it passes, then the seneschal will contact the site and work out the contracts and things of that nature.
TS, there's
Yeah.
one caveat to that.
Go ahead.
If they're planning on trying to use challenge, it has to go through
Through Kingdom, yeah.
For reasons.
Yeah, for reasons.
Also, for cantons, you have to go through your local barony and make sure your barony,
The Baron and Baroness.
Baron and Baroness has knowledge of this as well, so you can get more people to help with your bid. Is also a good thing too.
Yeah. Yeah, again, that it typically has to go through the baronial groups, or if you're a standalone, then it's a little different. Like if you're, say, the group out of Stark, I'm forgetting their name all of a sudden. It's killing me.
Oh, really?
No, I'm kidding. But yeah, they're when you're a standalone group, you're not part of a barony, then you have a little more flexibility. Biggest thing that the kingdom wants to do is make sure that you can cover your costs. So that's one of the things you do want to keep in mind when you're running a baronial event versus a kingdom event. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody. Again, I appreciate everybody for attending and look forward to seeing you guys next week. Again, I'll put it out on Facebook earlier than I did this time. I apologize. I thought I'd put it out yesterday early, and apparently that didn't happen. I forgot to do something and it didn't post. So I apologize to everybody on that. So I will post a link to the recording for people who want to watch this one, and we'll just keep doing that going forward. So take care. Have a great night. For those of you that bought lottery tickets, good luck. May fortune be in your favor. Though I'm going to have the winning ticket. So, sorry about that. As I see everybody giving me interesting
Consolation prize.
consolation prizes. There we go. All right. You guys be safe and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.